Okay, it's time to start building our device, and we're going to start with these Schottky diodes, these little square things. And one of the things you'll notice about these and the other two ICs that we're going to put in is when they come, they're a little too wide to go through the holes easily. If you try to put those in there, you find that they don't quite fit. So what you're going to do with these is take the two of them and kind of stick them together like this and get them interlaced. And the reason we do that is because now when we bend them, it'll keep it from bending too far. The bodies of the things sort of hold it. And you set it on the table like this, put your finger on it, and just give it a good push to bend those legs down. And then turn it the other way, give it a push. And now, of course, they're sort of locked together now because we squeezed them, but you pull them apart and the legs should be more or less straight up and down. Now, one of the really important things is that they have to go in the right direction. And you'll see on here, there's a little dot in the corner there, and that corresponds to the square hole. You see that hole there is square, there's a little dip in the symbol there. So it should go in there. Sometimes you have to nudge them a little bit. There you go. And we'll get those two in. Now once those are in there, we can solder them. And it's always good to solder the corners first and double check. They're down tight against the board. And now I've kind of deliberately done that. You see, just to illustrate, you see this one isn't flat against the board. So what I'm going to do is press it with my thumb, reheat it, and that'll snap down against the board nice and tight. Don't do it too long, you'll burn yourself. So those are good. They're down tight against the board, they're soldered in, and now we can finish the job. And so on down the line. There we go. Next we're going to do this resistor. And this one, interestingly enough, it doesn't matter which way it goes. There's a little tiny dot right there, but it actually doesn't matter. It's just a resistor, it can go either way. And it can be a little tricky. Sometimes you sort of hold those as you turn it over. And this tends to, I like on this one to just solder one end and then turn it over, make sure it's down flat and vertical, looks nice, and then solder the rest of it on down the line. There we go. Next, we're going to solder the Teensy on, the most important element of our device. And to do this, we need these header pins. And these come slightly longer. They're called breakaway pins because what you do is you break them off. They're designed to break. And you want it to be exactly the length of this Teensy here. And what you do is stick it in there and look and see where the right length is. Be sure you've got it in here at the end, and you find the one that's at that end. And you reach here, you grab it, and you just break it. Like that. And if you do that, it should be exactly the right length. I've already done this one, so we're ready to solder these together. Now it's really important you put the long pins down, and we're going to cut those off later. So we put those two in there, and then put the Teensy on top, and that is just mostly to hold it straight. So you're going to put that on top, and then let's flip this over. And that should sit there nicely. And once again, we're going to do the corners first and then make sure it's all down and straight and everything before we go on, because once you solder these things, they're very hard to unsolder. So we get the corners. once you get the four corners soldered down, the best thing to do is to go ahead and solder the entire Teensy for its whole length. That tends to hold those headers nice and straight and stable. And you'll notice it's a little wobbly. You can put something underneath it like this. A pencil seems to work pretty well just to stabilize it. And once that's ready to go, just go along on the top here. Oh, before you do that though, it's super important to make sure that this USB is here where it says USB, and this micro SD is here. If you get them backwards, it's kind of a disaster. So double check. The SD card holder is here, the USB connector is here. Okay, so let's solder it on. And so on down the line. Okay, now that that's done, check it out, make sure you got everything, didn't miss anything, and let's go along and do the bottom. And this is just like before, we'll just go on down the line and solder everything. And so on down the line. And finally, the last thing we need to do on the Teensy itself is to cut off these the excess on these leads. And one convenient trick for doing that is to just put a little piece of tape over it. The reason is because you don't want them shooting all over the room, and they actually, when you cut them, they actually shoot pretty hard. This is where your diagonal cutters are really nice because you can cut so close to the board. It makes for a nice, neat thing when you're through. Just go along and cut all those excess ones off. It's pretty fast. I should say, not only does the tape make it neat, but these things come off pretty hard and can hit you in the eye or something like that. So I really recommend you use something to keep them from shooting around the room. By the way, in the long run, we're looking for a socket that is the right length to begin with. It's remarkably hard to find. This is an unusual use of these header pins, I should say pins, not sockets. Let's see if I got them all. Yep. And there you go. Nice and neat. Our Teensy is ready to work. Next, we're going to do the audio shield to put that on. And this is exactly like putting the Teensy on, so I won't go through it in great detail. The main thing I want to mention is that it goes like this, not like this. You'll see the micro SD card is here and the audio jack is here. Be sure you get it on in that direction. One trick I will mention with the audio shield is that once you get the headers broken to the right length and you put this on here, it can be handy to just tape it down while you solder the bottom side, like that. And once you get those four corners soldered, you can take this off and double check that the headers are down nice and tight against the printed circuit board. Then put the audio shield back on top, make sure it's lined up properly, and you can solder it as we did before. All right, the audio shield is soldered on properly. We've trimmed the leads as we did with the Teensy itself. Now it's time to put on these spring terminal blocks. And they go right here along the bottom. Now, if you're going to do the vibrator, if you're going to add vibrations to your project also, there's 5 of these that can go in here. If you only have audio, then there's only 3. You only put the first 3 in. So an audio only project is going to look like this, whereas if you have vibrators, you're going to go ahead and add those last 2. I'm going to go do these all at the same time, but if you're only doing audio, remember you don't put the last 2 in. Now, I like to hold these in with tape as we did before. It's nice to put a piece of tape on there, kind of stick it down a little bit. And then you can turn it over and start by soldering the corners. Now in this case, I usually only solder one corner to start with because one corner is enough to hold it rigidly. while you check to make sure that it's down. So let's do that. We're going to solder one corner of each one. Then we can take the tape off, and as always we check to make sure that they're lined up and flat against the board. Now you can see this one isn't, so what I'm going to do is just press on it with my finger and reheat that solder joint. Press it down. Looks better. In fact, this one's not either, so let's do it on that one. Okay, now they're all nice and tight against the board. We can solder the rest of the terminals in. And finally, for those of you who are adding vibrators to your project, we'll solder in the L293D amplifiers. And again, as with these diodes, the legs are going to be a little too wide. We're going to do the same thing we did earlier with the diodes to bend these legs. That is to say, just kind of put them together like this so that they're interlaced, and then set them down on the table. Give them a push. Wiggle them just a little bit and turn it over. Do the same thing, and now with any luck those legs will be nice and straight and you can drop them right in. And always, always, always double check. There's a groove here at this end and a groove that's shown on the silk screen on the board. Be sure those are the same way. So double check that you got both of those in there correctly and that everything is down. And you can solder those in. We'll start with the corners. I think this one popped up a little bit. Yes, it did, so I'm going to push that down, reheat it, get that thing to go down nice and flat against the board. Let's do the same here just to be sure. Yep. All right, nice and neat, down flat. Let's solder the rest of them. And there you have it. The board is finished.